The forest held its breath. Moonlight sliced through the frozen crust of snow, casting a deceptive illusion of peace. The trees stood motionless, their shadows stretching along the path, vanishing into the depths of the night. The frigid air bit at her lungs, but she barely registered the cold. Elena was tied to a tree. The rough rope dug into her wrists, pinning her in place. Her hands had long since gone numb, and a trapped animal thrashed in her chest. Breathing grew harder with each torturous gasp. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope warmed her, that this could still be stopped, that someone would come, that it wasn't too late. But she wasn't alone. She knew it before she saw him. A barely perceptible presence pressing on her mind, alien, heavy. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. A wolf. He stood in the shadows, blending with the night's gloom. A dark silhouette, unmoving, only his eyes. 2 amber spots, a faint glow in the forest's depths. He didn't blink, didn't stir. Then he shifted softly, paw over paw, his body gliding into the moonlight. He was massive. His thick, dark fur seemed black, but if the sun were here, it would reveal its hidden hues. Ears flattened against his skull, lips trembling slightly, barely exposing his fangs. He approached silently, like a shadow woven from the night air. Elena gasped unevenly, belatedly realizing that fear had completely paralyzed her. This wasn't the kind of fear people feel in moments of conscious danger. This was something ancient, coded in her blood, and primal knowledge that a predator was near, capable of ending her existence with one swift move. She couldn't escape. The wolf knew it. Time slowed. He sniffed her, not coming close, but moving his nose, taking in her scent. Elena felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. She didn't remember when she started screaming. The scream tore from her chest, deafening even to herself. It wasn't just a sound. It was a shriek of pure terror, without a trace of conscious panic. It erupted from the depths of her mind, from where primeval fears, not yet clothed in words, lay hidden. The wolf flinched. His ears twitched. His lips curled higher, baring dazzling white teeth. A faint rustle of snow beneath his paws. He took a step forward. Elena froze. The forest again became dark, silent, infinitely deep. You're on a channel with original stories. All names and place names have been changed. Subscribe, like, and watch to the end. Here we go. Memories flooded back in a sharp, warm whirlwind, so unexpected against the current icy terror. She'd had winter nights in her life before, too, but different ones, filled with candlelight, the scent of wood smoke, and the warm voices of her parents. Elena and Mark were born in a small cabin at the edge of the forest. Their father, Robert, was a hunter, but not like those shown in old books. He didn't kill for sport. He knew the forest was alive, that every creature had its place within it. Hunting for him was not a sport, but an art of survival. He took no more than he needed and taught his children respect for nature. Their mother, Anne, was a biologist. She could talk for hours about animal life, and even the most ordinary fox track in the snow would become a whole story. During the day, she and their father would go into the forest, and in the evening they would gather the children by the fireplace and tell them what they had seen. "The forest is a book," their mother would say, stroking Elena's hair. "Every track is a word. If you learn to read them, you'll understand animals better than people." Mark, always more impatient, tried to guess whose track they had found on their morning walks. One day he pointed his finger at a deep imprint on the bank of a frozen stream and proudly declared, "That's a bear." "It's a dog," their father corrected, smiling. "No, definitely a bear." Mark frowned, unwilling to back down. Their father stood beside him, crouched down, carefully examining the track. "All right, let's check. If it's a bear, it should be bigger than your hand. Put your hand down." Mark obediently covered the track with his palm, and it turned out to be almost the same size. He was embarrassed. "But, see," their father smiled. "You weren't wrong about the shape, but you forgot about the size. Learn the details, then you'll become a true tracker." From childhood, Elena felt that the forest was more than just a place to walk for her and her brother. It was a part of their family, woven into their childhood. Every night, before bed, their mother would tell them stories, but not about princes and kings, but about wolves. "Wolves aren't evil creatures as fairy tales say," she'd whisper, sitting on the edge of the bed. "They are loyal, they care for their packs, they never abandon their own." Elena loved these stories, especially the one where a small wolf pup got lost in the forest, but an old wise wolf took him under his protection and showed him how to survive. "Mom," Mark asked one day, "do wolves have human friends?" Their mother thought for a moment. "Rarely," she said, "but sometimes they do. If a person and a wolf cross paths at the right moment, if both are alone, then they can understand each other." They didn't know then how prophetic those words would prove to be. When their parents died in an accident, the forest became the only place where Elena and Mark felt alive. They couldn't leave it. Everything they had been taught since childhood, everything they had dreamed of, led them here, to the Canadian Rockies. The wildlife park became their refuge, their home. Here they could be themselves. Here the wolves were safe. But safety is always an illusion that one day shatters. Damien entered her life as if carried by the wind from distant lands. It was late autumn. The forest was already gripped by the first frosts, and an icy mist rose in the mountains, covering the peaks in a thick veil. Elena was returning with Mark from the nearby town where she had gone for supplies. They rarely left the park, but sometimes they had to. On the way back, right at the boundary of their land, they noticed a man. He stood by his SUV, clearly broken down, examining the engine with an expression that mixed irritation and slight bewilderment. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man of about 35, with sharp features, short dark hair, and eyes the color of a stormy sky. There was something unsettling about him. "Having trouble?" Elena asked, stepping out of their vehicle. The man looked up, smiled, easily, confidently, as if they were old acquaintances. "Looks like the battery died," he said with a slight accent she didn't immediately recognize. "Damien!" He extended a hand, and Elena automatically shook it. "Elena, and this is my brother Mark." Mark didn't respond. He just gave a short nod, his lips pressed tight. Elena didn't give it much thought then. They helped Damien, hooking his SUV with a tow rope and pulling it to their workshop. That night, he stayed in the park. Their home had a few guest rooms, and they never turned away travelers. The next day, Damien was smiling again over a cup of coffee, thanking them for their help and promising to repay them sometime. He stayed for 2 more days, and then for a week, and then he started showing up more and more often. Elena fell for him quickly, too quickly. He was different, intelligent, witty, self-assured. He listened to her with genuine interest. knew as much about the wild as she did, but saw everything differently. He had a strange perspective, as if he understood life from another angle. Wolves are the perfect survival machine, he told her one evening, sitting by the fireplace. They don't wage wars, don't destroy the world that feeds them. They simply exist, unlike us. Unlike you? She smiled. He looked at her, but didn't reply. And then he kissed her. Mark watched all this with a grim expression. He didn't trust Damien. "He's not who he seems," he said one evening at dinner, when Damien was away for a few days. "You just don't want me to be happy," Elena snapped back. She truly believed that. Her brother had always been too cautious. He didn't trust strangers, didn't like changes. "That's not it." Mark sighed heavily, putting down his fork. "It's just, you can't trust people like him. You don't even know him. But he knows us." That phrase stung her. She brushed off her doubts, but somewhere deep inside, unease had already settled. It grew stronger a few weeks later. One night, she overheard Damien talking on the phone. He was outside, but his voice sounded muffled through the glass. Elena didn't understand the language. It wasn't English, or French, or German. The words were short, sharp, almost hissing. She didn't know what troubled her more, the language itself, or the tone of his voice. Calm, confident, but with something hidden in the inflection. She thought then that he was just speaking his native language. Maybe he had family somewhere far away. But then he saw her reflection in the glass and cut the conversation short. "Everything all right?" he asked, coming inside. Elena nodded, though she felt that no, it wasn't all right. But she told herself she was just overthinking things. She didn't know then how wrong she was. The night was quiet. The trees stood still, the snow muffled sounds, and even the wind had died down, as if observing something important. Elena couldn't sleep. Thoughts swirled in her head about Damien, about Mark, about the unsettling conversation she had accidentally overheard. Something about it wouldn't let her rest. She told herself she was exaggerating, that she just wasn't used to strangers in her life. But the feeling that the ice beneath her feet was cracking wouldn't leave her. She stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cold air, trying to calm herself. The park at night was completely different, not like during the day. It seemed to breathe differently in the darkness, as if the trees were watching her, hiding in their shadows things that shouldn't be there. And then she saw two figures. Below, in a clearing between the trees, stood two men. One of them was Damien. The other was a man Elena didn't recognize. She was about to call out to Damien, but something made her freeze. Perhaps his posture, too tense, too ready to attack. Perhaps the light of the flashlight he held, illuminating the stranger's face. She decided to observe. The conversation was short. "You don't understand who you're playing with," the man said, his voice trembling with anger. "On the contrary," Damien calmly replied, "it's you who doesn't understand." Something in his voice sent a chill down Elena's spine. "I'll pay," the other man said quickly. I need a little more time." Damien shook his head slowly, like a wolf stalking its prey. "Too late." The man cried out something, but in the next second, Damien stepped forward, lightning fast, without hesitation, a gleam of steel, a dark stain on the snow, a quiet moan that almost immediately cut off. The man slumped to the ground, and Damien stood over him, wiping his knife on the man's coat. Elena couldn't breathe. She knew she should scream, that she should run. But her feet were rooted to the porch floor, her gaze unable to tear away from what had just happened. Damien looked up. He saw her, and then everything changed. He didn't look scared, wasn't shocked. Not a single muscle on his face twitched. He slowly wiped his hands on his jacket, took a step forward. Elena recoiled, but it was too late. "Come down," he said. She didn't move. "Come down, Elena," he repeated. His voice was soft, but left no choice. She took a step down, then another. Her legs trembled. When only a couple of steps separated them, he leaned towards her almost tenderly. "I don't know what you saw," he whispered, "but if you betray me—" His fingers lightly traced her cheek. "I'll find you, always." He said it as if making an oath. Fear constricted her throat. She could have run. She could have bolted into the forest, woken Mark, called the police. But something told her it wouldn't change anything, because he wasn't afraid. He knew she wouldn't leave, and he was right. The days after that night dragged on neon-eyely, like a rotten swamp. Elena didn't know how to continue living next to Damien, knowing who he truly was. But fear was stronger than logic. She tried not to think, not to remember, pretended nothing had happened. It was easier than admitting the truth. He had killed a man. Calmly, without emotion, without hesitation. And it was even easier to believe that if she remained silent, if she didn't show fear, he would leave her alone. But he knew. "You've changed," he said one day, as she cleared the table, not meeting his gaze. She gripped the plate so hard her knuckles turned white. "Just tired." He didn't reply, but his gaze burned into her skin, and she knew. He felt her fear. When the officers arrived at the house, she knew it was the end. Interpol. They had been looking for Damien for several years, and they found him. Elena understood it from his eyes. He sat in the armchair as if nothing had happened, didn't move when the police stormed in. He even smirked, and then his gaze fell on her. She understood that he thought she had turned him in, and then hell began. He struck her first with his open hand, sharp, lightning fast, then with his fist. She fell, feeling hot blood drip onto the wooden floor. Everything swam before her eyes, but she managed to notice that the police weren't intervening. They gave him a chance to retaliate. He squatted beside her. "Was it you?" His voice was calm, almost gentle. She couldn't speak, only swallowed the blood in her mouth. "I knew you'd betray me." He slowly ran his fingers along her chin, forcing her to look up. "Everyone betrays." Through the haze of pain, she heard the officers conversing behind her. Damien was given exactly as much time as he wanted, and then they grabbed him, restrained him, were about to take him away. But before he was led out the door, he leaned down to her and whispered, "This isn't the end." She knew he wasn't lying. Elena died the day Damien was led away in handcuffs. At least, that's how it felt to her. That night, when the police left, leaving her bleeding on the floor as she lay in the darkness, trying to decide if she should get up, she realized one thing: she had nowhere to run. She could hide, she could change her identity, she could erase her past, but that didn't mean it would forget her. Damien wouldn't forget. He said, "This isn't the end," and she believed him. A month later, her name was Anna Miller. She moved deep into the Appalachian wilderness, to a place where her parents had once dreamed of establishing a wildlife sanctuary. Now, it was her refuge. They shouldn't find her here. She told herself it was right, that she needed peace, that she was free now. But the silence stifled her. When you live in fear, in constant tension, adrenaline becomes your drug. Without it, it feels like you no longer exist. The sanctuary became her salvation and her prison. The wolves were the only ones who demanded nothing from her. They didn't ask questions, didn't look at her with pity, didn't try to uncover her secrets. They simply lived, and she lived with them. Elena, now Anna, spent her days observing the packs, studying them, recording her observations. The shadow pack, those who always kept their distance, cautious, almost invisible. And the hunter pack, strong, brave, those who guarded their territory at all costs. She was among them, but not with them, until she met him. It was a cold day when she found the wolf pup. She first heard a whimper, pathetic, barely discernible through the howling wind. Off to the side, in a snowdrift, he lay, small, thin, with blood matted on his paws. Poachers. Anna had seen this before. They had killed his mother, perhaps his entire pack. But for some reason, they had left him to die slowly. He didn't move when she approached, only twitched an ear weakly. She carefully picked him up, holding him close to her chest. "It's okay," she whispered. She didn't know if he would survive, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't let him die alone. The wolf pup lived. He grew, gaining strength. He didn't trust her. For weeks he ate from her hands, but if she made a sudden movement, he would dart away, ears flattened, baring his teeth. She didn't tame him. She was just there. And one day, when she stepped out of the cabin at night, he sat beside her. Just sat, as if he had always been there. And then she understood. Now she, too, was part of the pack. But she didn't know yet how much he would change her destiny. The day was quiet. Late autumn had arrived in the Rockies, that very season when the forest pauses in anticipation of winter. The leaves had already fallen, leaving the trees bare, but the snow had not yet covered the ground. Everything seemed frozen, slowed, as if nature was taking one last deep breath before the long frosts. Elena sat on the porch, sipping hot tea, watching the wolves leisurely roam on the distant hill. They were relaxed, exchanging lazy glances, surveying their territory. She felt calm, too, almost. The wolf pup she had nursed back to health was no longer a weak youngling. He had grown into a powerful beast, confident, strong, with fur the color of the night sky and eyes that sometimes flashed with something too knowing. He hadn't left, as wolves often do when raised by humans. He had stayed. Sometimes she wondered why. Perhaps he knew she still needed protection. That day, Mark appeared unexpectedly. He rarely visited the sanctuary, too fond of city life, though he continued to help her with whatever was needed. He'd bring documents, sort out supply issues. But today, his demeanor was strange. He stepped out of his car slowly, his lips pressed into a thin line, and handed her an envelope. "This is from the police," he said softly. Elena took it, but her hands were already trembling. She didn't know what was inside yet, but she felt it. She tore open the paper, pulled out the letter, read it slowly. Mark watched her face, waiting for her to understand. She understood. Damien had escaped. She sat on the porch for a long time, clutching the sheet of paper. The words, printed in black letters, seemed distant to her, as if it wasn't about her. But her body already knew everything. She felt the fear return, how it once again caught her breath, how something slowly tightened into a knot inside her. This wasn't fear of Damien as a person. This was fear of inevitability. She knew he would come. He had told her so then before they took him away. This isn't the end. She had deluded herself into believing he would disappear, that even if he escaped, he would have other worries, that he would forget her. But she knew he wouldn't forget. He would find her. "You have to leave," Mark said. They sat at the kitchen table, but Elena wasn't eating. She couldn't. She looked out the window, at the distant hills, at the shadows moving between the trees. To where? Her voice was hoarse. Another country, far away. She smirked. "You think he won't find me?" Mark said nothing. She looked at him. He's a hunter. It was true. Damien didn't let go of his prey. She couldn't sleep that night. She lay in the dark, listening to the wind, straining for every sound. The wolf lay by her door, as always, as if he sensed her anxiety. She turned on her side, closed her eyes. She knew her time was running out. Mark left early in the morning. He was going to check the traps. Poaching incidents had increased in the park in recent weeks. She and Elena had often found traces of strangers, ruined wolf dens, traps left in the most unexpected places. "I won't be long," he said, zipping up his jacket. "Be careful," Elena replied, not looking up. She watched him until he disappeared into the forest, then returned to her tasks. It was cold outside, but not severely so, that moment between autumn and winter when the air stings the skin, but the snow hasn't yet settled. The day dragged lazily, but when the sun began to dip below the horizon, Elena noticed that Mark hadn't returned. She looked at her watch. He had been gone longer than he should have been. At first, she wasn't worried. She knew he might be delayed. Perhaps he found something important. Perhaps he went farther than planned. But when another 2 hours passed and the sky darkened, anxiety squeezed her chest. She picked up the radio. "Mark, do you hear me?" Only static. "Mark, respond." Silence. Elena gritted her teeth. She tried not to think the worst. But inside, she already knew. Something had happened. She got ready quickly. Warm clothes, rifle slung over her shoulder, knife, spare batteries. She was always prepared for such things. Her wolf stood beside her, watching her. He made no sound, but she knew. He sensed her anxiety. When she stepped out the door, he followed her. Mark's trail was not difficult. He left light indentations in the soft earth, broken branches. Elena walked quickly until she reached a spot where the tracks abruptly ceased, and next to them, other tracks, human, unfamiliar. Her heart sank. She knelt, peering closer. The tracks were fresh, left no more than a few hours ago. She looked ahead. The edge of the forest was dark, silent. Then she saw the blood. She didn't remember running. Everything merged into one. The dark trees, the air, icy as steel, the crunch of branches under her feet. She saw before her a trail of blood, stretching deeper into the forest. And then she found him. Mark lay on the snow. His eyes were open, but saw nothing now. One shot to the chest, a second to the head, a finishing shot. Elena clapped a hand over her mouth. The world narrowed to a single point. The silence was absolute. Only her heart pounded loudly, relentlessly. And then she felt it, an alien presence. Someone stood behind her. But before she could turn around, a blow to her head plunged her into darkness. Consciousness returned slowly. At first, there was only a hum in her ears, like the distant howl of wind in the mountains. Then, a sharp pain at the back of her head, throbbing, pulling, as if someone's fingers were squeezing her skull. Then the cold, piercing, clinging, seeping under her clothes. Elena flinched but couldn't move. Her hands were tied. She opened her eyes slightly. The world swam, but through the veil of darkness she saw trees, tall black silhouettes against the white snow, and before her, a shadow, footsteps, slow, unhurried. A man emerged from the darkness. "Hello, Elena." The voice was the same, calm, drawn out, with a hint of mockery. She froze. He was here. Damien. She wasn't surprised. She knew he would come, knew that this was how it would end. "Didn't expect to see me?" He leaned closer, examining her like a hunter assessing his prey. She stared at him, not answering. His eyes were calm. Not a trace of anger, not a trace of hatred, only cold certainty. "I looked for you for a long time," he continued, squatting in front of her. "You're good at escaping. Better than I thought." He took a strand of her hair, ran it through his fingers. "But you knew I'd find you, didn't you?" She remained silent. "And now what?" She finally managed to force out. He smirked. "Now?" He stood up, stepping back. "Now, we'll have some fun." He pulled out a knife. Steel glinted in the moonlight. "You betrayed me, Helena." His voice was soft, almost tender. "I thought long and hard about how to punish you." He ran the blade across his palm, leaving a thin red line. "I could just kill you, but that's too boring." He stepped closer. "But if we do it slowly—" She didn't look away. She wouldn't show him fear. But at that moment, something shifted. Damien suddenly froze. Elena noticed it in the tension of his shoulders, the slight flicker in his eyes. He felt something. She heard it too. Footsteps, quiet, barely audible, and from the forest he emerged. Large, dark as night itself, the wolf moved silently like a shadow. His eyes glowed amber, and he stopped a few feet from them. He didn't attack, just watched. Elena knew him. It was him, the wolf pup she had saved. Damien smirked, shaking his head. "A wolf?" He looked at Elena mockingly. "You think he'll help?" He raised the knife, then slowly lowered it, embedding it in the snow before him. "All right, let's see." The wolf didn't move. Damien chuckled, bending down, about to retrieve the knife, and at that moment the wolf attacked. It happened fast. A lunge. A dark blur merged with the night shadow, and in the next instant the wolf clamped onto his shoulder. A scream, loud, tearing through the night silence. Damien fell back, trying to fight him off, but the wolf was faster. He latched onto his throat, slamming the body to the snow. Elena looked away. The screams quickly died down. Then silence. Only the crunch of snow as the wolf stepped back, breathing heavily. She looked up. Damien was no longer moving, and the wolf stood, looking directly at her. She didn't know how much time had passed, but eventually he slowly turned and walked into the forest. She was left alone, watching his silhouette dissolve into the darkness. She understood. Animals can be more human than people. Elena walked along the snow-covered trail, leaving light footprints behind her. The snow crunched underfoot, the air filled with icy freshness. She was alone, but now solitude didn't frighten her. The night was clear, stars burning high above the Rockies, reflected in the frozen tree branches. The world around was silent, but in this quietude there was no fear, only peace. She stopped, peering into the dark silhouettes of the trees ahead. Somewhere there, amidst the shadows, he was. He had gone into the night as he should, like a wolf, and yet she felt his presence, and then she heard it, a howl, deep, drawn out, echoing over the mountains. One voice, then another, a third, the pack. She stood, listening to the sound, feeling it fill her, penetrate the depths of her soul. There, in that howl, was something familiar. She smiled, took one last look towards the forest, turned around, and walked on. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this story? Share your thoughts. Your comments are highly valued.